And vacation she was taking, yes, but with the boyfriend instead. We heard in opening statements to Pigeon Forge, to Gatlinburg, all because of this new relationship she was in. Let's bring in our guest to discuss this. We have National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar joining us while we all wait for the judge to take the bench in this case. Michael, there have been some really effective lay witnesses taking the stand in this case.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The lay witnesses have been so impactful that I was thinking yesterday. I was wondering why the defense attorneys didn't just waive the jury in this case, right? They must have known that this type of inflammatory information would have been presented to the jury, that this type of emotional witnesses, her best friend, the tears, the crying, the legs popping out of the trash can. I just thought to myself, there's no way that a jury, I mean, they tried to even get the venue moved because of how badly this jury pool would look at this fact pattern and how inflammatory it would be. So I was just thinking to myself, the judge himself, it's not like you have a winning hand if you're the defense anyway, but the judge is a grizzled veteran, accustomed to looking at pretty grotesque fact patterns in both his career, in his courtroom, in his experience. Because at the end of the day, we really don't know how Baby Evelyn died. We really don't know whether or not her mom killed her. All we know is that she lied. All we know is that she covered up. But then again, she was a kid and she was scared. Maybe there's two universes, right, Julia? There's a universe where she killed her intentionally and tried to cover it up. And there's a universe where she killed her unintentionally by accident and tried to cover it up. Those are the only two universes that exist. We just don't know which one we're in. And so for this jury to really ferret through the evidence and really tell us, hey, rationally, I think this was an unintentional murder, I think it's asking the jury for too much. I don't know if that's something that a jury can really come to with how these lay witnesses have been performing. I think it's a really, really, not even a steep climb. I think it's an impossible task for the defense. I wish they would have just waived the jury.
Interesting.
But Michael, talk about that in regard to clients that you've had, and when you have to talk with them about, you can have a bench trial, you can have a jury trial. Everybody has a right to a jury trial. I mean, how do you discuss that choice with them?
I'm so glad you asked. This is so attorneys sometimes practice what we call defensive legal representation, where we are worried about somebody accusing us of malpractice if and when they get convicted, right? So we're worried about that. So there's our private feeling when we think we should waive a jury, and there's the feeling of, hey, well, I mean, it's a more conservative thing for me to not waive the jury, do a good case, and then if they get convicted, at least they can't say an ineffective assistance of counsel appeal, hey, he waived the jury. I've done it many times. I remember a rape case, when I just knew. I knew that jury would convict my client, but I knew that the specific judge in that case would be able to peer through all the emotional evidence, and I got an acquittal, right? Now, there have been times when I've waived the jury and I've got a conviction, right? So obviously it lives with you, but when you know deep down, this specific judge is a grizzled veteran, and there's too much emotional, impactful testimony that's going to be introduced in this case, you live with the consequences. Because when you go into that courtroom, you're going into the theater, you're going into the tournament, basically. You could win, you could lose, but you had to give your client the best chance of success. In this case, I wouldn't have even hesitated. I would have told my client to answer your question. Look, the law changed in our state because of this fact pattern. We tried to move the jury. This jury pool is way too inflamed. They're out for blood. They're going to get you, young lady. You're going to spend 60 years potentially in prison. We got to get it in the hands of the judge, and we got to live and die with what we can present to this judge. We have no choice. And I would have let her make the choice, obviously. So it's always the defendant's choice. But I would have passionately told her, let's waive the jury.
Okay, you're talking about that emotional testimony being one of the things that really is going to unfortunately move the needle one way or the other outside of the fact patterns. But even that cause of death in this case, if there are question marks about it, I think the prosecution is trying to show as well as they can what could have happened, asking these jurors to make the leap. And there was a babysitter on the stand earlier who talked about that. Let's listen back to what her observations were of Baby Evelyn. Michael Jaafar, it paints a picture of what the life was like. And when you add that with new boyfriend, she's wanting to spend all her time with him. If it's not intentional, and I use that loosely because when you neglect a child, that is still it's an intentional act. But do you think the jury's going to make that leap that a cause of death could simply have been ignoring her child?
Yes, and this witness is another example of why I believe that this jury should have been waived, because the defense attorneys would have seen her on the exhibit list. They would have asked, they would have known specifically what this woman was going to be testifying to, right? And so the jury is going to make. I mean, it's disgusting, it's grotesque, but at the end of the day, does her testimony mean that Evelyn killed, that her mom killed her intentionally? I don't believe so. I mean, I know this witness had to be introduced. Her testimony had to be introduced. She called the doctor, right? She had an official capacity, semi-official capacity in the care of the baby. So I know her testimony had to be admitted. But at the end of the day, still, it's so inflammatory. It's still not relevant to the fact whether or not the defendant murdered baby Evelyn or not. This is an example of why I believe that this jury is not going to be, we're asking them too much to make the leap to say that baby Evelyn was killed unintentionally. At the end of the day, either way, the best case scenario for the defendant is to have a lower felony, maybe even a high manslaughter. That's the best case scenario. The best case scenario is for her to be convicted to a felony of involuntary manslaughter or voluntary manslaughter, potentially voluntary manslaughter. But at the end of the day, how is the jury going to get there when they have a baby Evelyn's legs popping out of a trash can? They'll know that. They'll have that in their notebook when they're debating. Once the trial is done, it really comes down to the closing argument of the defense attorney, how well of a job they do when they get there. How well can they bring in a witness that show that their client loved her daughter, she was broken up. At the end of the day, it also comes down to lying, right? I think they should have an expert that can come in and testify as to why a person would lie and explain that a person lies because of childhood trauma, things growing up, and they feel that their fight or flight response is to lie when they're nervous, even if they've done nothing wrong. An expert could come in and say people lie over all kinds of things when they become an adult because of trauma they had when they were a kid. And she made a mistake. Her kid died unintentionally. She was very nervous. She didn't know how to handle it, right? So I think a judge would have been a good absorption of that type of evidence and been able to really consider it. I think you're still asking a jury for way too much. The lying, the deceit, the changing of the story, which, by the way, the defense are going to say she didn't change her story. That's a whole separate thing. But I think that you're asking a jury for too much.
Interesting analysis, Michael. Michael Jaafar, thank you so much. We're going to have more from the Baby Evelyn murder trial for Megan Boswell in Tennessee when we come back. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Where the defendant
Hitting the pause button on this testimony and bringing in our guest who is standing by, National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar with us. Michael, we have this witness sharing some really kind details about the victim, talking about his ambition and how he cared about his family and what was best for his family. And I'm noticing the facial expressions again with this defendant, where she usually, when they're saying something nice about Fabio, she acts like, yes, we all loved him.
Yeah, listen, I've vacillated on how well I like or don't like her courtroom demeanor. You know, a couple days ago, she was feverishly making notes when Luigi Sementilli, the son, was on the stand. But at the end of the day, you know, she's not exactly a well-adjusted person. I can see why the state hates her. The state really hates this woman. They crawled over broken glass to bring these charges against her, right? And I think their best friend is Austin, the other co-conspirator. I mean, they are really hanging their hat on every single piece of evidence they have, every witness they have, and they're bringing all this emotional testimony to people who love this man. They absolutely detest this woman, and she is coming off as a very contemptible person to the jury with her body room demeanor and her courtroom demeanor. So I think I hate to say this. Watching her is a little entertaining because we kind of all know that she did it. I mean, at least I believe she did it. That's just my hunch. My hunch is that, and I'm going to keep an open mind until I see the defense case. But at the end of the day, if Austin comes in and says she was the mastermind of it, I know he's probably not going to be able to say he spoke to her directly. But if that happens, I really believe that the jury is going to overcome any type of reasonable doubt, and they're going to convict this woman. But at the end of the day, she's not doing herself any favor with the way she's acting in that courtroom.
Michael, you brought up Luigi, the son of Fabio. He testified, and yeah, even talking about her demeanor there. At first, she was all smiles when he first got on the stand, but then he started talking about some situations where, you know, he noticed something about a grocery store worker, and possibly she liked somebody, and all this stuff, and she wasn't too happy then.
Yeah. Listen. So when we're in law school, they'd always tell us, "Hey, listen, when you don't have to prove motive, but you know, When you have a life insurance policy, for example, or when you have an affair, one of those two, then all of a sudden motive becomes clear. In this case, you have both, and it's almost like this case is a caricature of what they tell us in law school. We're not going to test you on because it's too easy. It's just way too easy to tell you that this person died all of a sudden, and then the spouse had a life insurance policy and had an affair. It's too easy. We're not going to give you that fact pattern. You can go ahead and read about that in your case books. But at the end of the day, we're going to give you more difficult fact patterns for you to ferret through. So here, this woman, her alleged conduct is a caricature of the alleged conduct of any criminal who would put to death a loved one. And then again, you have Luigi Sementilli coming in, and she was nice and she was emotional when he started, and then she changed. I'm not a doctor. Maybe she has a personality disorder. I have no idea. Like, this woman is off. She's not a well-adjusted person. But again, I could see why the state hates her, because they know her. They know the type of person she is. They've been watching her text messages and phone calls when she's in jail. They've been looking at her manipulation of Baker, the co-conspirator, alleged co-conspirator. So they know who she is, and they detest this woman, and they detest the fact that she might get off and walk the streets and then smile at everybody and then have money.
And they want this jury to detest her as well. Michael Jaafar, stand by. We are going to take a break. Now, we've been waiting as well for Tennessee to start back up, the Baby Evelyn Murder Trial for Megan Boswell, and we are seeing some movement. So we will hit the pause button on Sementilli and get you into that courtroom after this. Stay with us.